It is July 3rd, 2020, and this is the latest news for Guatemala. Follow along. Okay, our first news story is from La Hora. Rule forces migrants to apply for asylum in third countries. The judge blocks safe third country rule in the United States. This is dated July 3rd, 2020. The rule that came into effect last year prohibits migrants from applying for asylum in the United States if they previously went through a third country and did not require this process there. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. reversed the immigration rule of the administration of President Donald Trump, known as the Third Country Traffic Rule, and which was adopted last year because it was considered to be in violation of the Immigration and Nationality Law, the INA, and violates other aspects. The rule that came into effect last year prohibits migrants from applying for asylum in the United States if they previously went through a third country and did not require this process there. The rule preceded the Asylum Cooperation Agreement, the ACA, which was signed by the government of then President Jimmy Morales, who was the first to submit to the White House's demand to restrict the right of asylum. In that specific case, asylum seekers from Honduras, El Salvador, and the United States were sent to Guatemala. The judge's considerations: the measure, according to a Telemundo note, was deemed by Judge Timothy Kelly to be illegal, arbitrary, and capricious. This norm obliges asylum-seeking migrants from Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador to go to Mexico before they ask for the United States for help. The judge mentioned in this decision that the rule is in principle illegal in several situations. The first, because it is contrary to the INA and the Traffic Victims Protection Reauthorization Law. Neil Katyal, former acting attorney general and legal analyst for MSNBC, said this decision invalidates Trump's ban on asylum on the southern border. Furthermore, he mentioned that this decision of Judge Kelly, whom the president appointed to the bench in 2017, enters force immediately. On the other hand, the Univision News Network indicates that the judge's decision considers that said rule was issued without the prior comment and notification procedures required by the Administrative Procedure Law, the APA. This regulation was implemented by the administration with the aim of stopping the arrival of asylum seekers to the southern border of the United States. At the time of regulation of this legal resource, they recalled, was questioned by organizations that defend migrants' rights. Asylum seekers cross into the United States to make claims at the port of entry in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. Okay, this story is from the AP. Guatemala, most workers at national lab have COVID-19. Guatemala City, according to the Associated Press, Guatemala President Alejandro Giammattei stated Wednesday that most of the 240 workers in the country's national laboratory have tested positive for COVID-19. The president told the governor's TGW radio that despite the infections, the lab continues processing COVID-19 tests. Giammattei characterized it as a crisis, but held up the example of a woman working at a lab who has the virus and feels bad, but continues processing samples. During the first months of the epidemic in Guatemala, all of the nation's COVID-19 testing was centralized at the lab. But as the number of cases have grown, the government has allowed public hospitals to test samples as well. Citizens have complained recently of waiting more than a week for test results. The mass infection at the national laboratory follows Giammattei's announcement that 158 people at the seat of his government have tested positive for the virus. Most of the infected work for the Secretary of Administrative Affairs and Security, which is charged with protecting the president and his family. Giammattei has reported that more than 14,000 confirmed infections and nearly 600 deaths. Okay, the story is from the AP again. 6 Guatemalans deported from U.S. test positive for COVID-19. This is dated June 23rd, 2020. Guatemala City, according to the Associated Press. At least 6 Guatemalans deported from the United States on June 9th tested positive for COVID-19, according to an official in Guatemala's health ministry. The flight was the first after a month-long suspension imposed by Guatemala after 186 migrants deported from the United States on various flights had tested positive for the disease. The official was not authorized to speak publicly and requested anonymity. The ministry has said that it is no longer plans to provide information about infected deportees to avoid stigmatizing them. The June 9th flight had arrived from Alexandria, Louisiana, carrying 40 adults and 10 children. Dr. Edwin Asturias, head of the Presidential Commission Against Coronavirus, said he was partially aware of the new infections, but stated that more testing was being done. Guatemala has temporarily suspended the deportation flights multiple times since the pandemic began in order to pressure the United States to better screen deportees for the disease. The United States began testing each deportee prior to putting them on the planes and sending a medical certification with them. However, deportees have still tested positive. Asturias said, "You can't 100% avoid the arrival of infected deportees owing to various factors, including that the test could be given while the virus is still incubating. To minimize the risk, Guatemala has asked for not only testing, but that no more than 50 deportees travel on one flight to reduce the risk of transmission." The non-governmental organization Refugees International published a report Tuesday that said deportees to Guatemala often struggle to regenerate, and deportations and returns carried out in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic compound these challenges and contribute to the spread of the virus. Since the start of the pandemic, the United States government has deported 2,359 Guatemalans, including 361 children. Guatemalans deported during the pandemic arrived home to face rising levels of food insecurity and a stagnant economy further hobbled by border closure and movement restrictions, the reporter said. Adults and children alike face stigma and a growing risk of violent attack as fear and misinformation about the disease continue to spread. As of Monday, Guatemala had reported more than 13,000 COVID-19 infections and nearly 550 deaths. Okay, this story is from the AP again, and it's dated June 22nd. 151 COVID cases at Guatemala president's residence. Guatemala City, again, according to the Associated Press, Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei stated Monday that 151 of the people who work at his office, at his official residence, have tested positive for COVID-19 and one has died. Many of the infections were found among workers in the Secretariat of Administrative Affairs and Security at the presidential residence, which includes his offices in downtown Guatemala City. Giammattei stated 69 of those infected have recovered, and at least 5 who have been in critical condition have improved. The president himself, a physician, has not tested positive. Giammattei made the announcement during an event at the Foreign Relations Ministry to announce that the European Union had donated laboratory material for 72,000 COVID-19 tests. Guatemala's tax agency has reported 36 cases and the prosecutor's office 19. Nationwide, Guatemala has reported 12,614 confirmed COVID-19 cases and 531 deaths. Okay, this story is dated June 9th, but it's notable, I think. It's from the Associated Press. It's entitled, 4 Arrested in Slaying of Mayan Spiritual Guide in Guatemala. Guatemala City, again, according to the Associated Press, 4 people have been arrested in connection with the killing of a well-known Mayan spiritual guide and natural medicine expert, Guatemala's National Civilian Police said Tuesday. Authorities said that the suspect went to the home of the victim, Domingo Chokche, on Saturday because they believed he had been performing witchcraft at a relative's gravesite. They beat him for hours and on Sunday doused him with gasoline and set him on fire, officials alleged. Chokche, known as Grandfather Domingo, had participated in a number of scientific research projects on Mayan natural medicine that yielded papers and books in collaboration with universities in England and Switzerland. He was known as Ahilonel, a Mayan medical specialist, a type of expert therapist in natural medicine. Among those arrested was a 24-year-old who allegedly told relatives that Chokche had sent him to the grave to deposit dirt for witchcraft. Also arrested were 2 brothers and a cousin. All 4 were charged with murder, police said. The incident occurred in Chimay, San Luis Petén, north of the capital. Okay, so these are the latest news stories for Guatemala as of July 3rd, 2020. I hope I provided some information. If I have, or anything that you find beneficial again on this channel, please go down and hit the subscribe button and click the bell to be alerted of any new videos. Thanks again for all my subscribers.
We have a YouTube channel, like it.
Please comment and share if you liked the video.
Please subscribe and kick the bell.